taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to Augmented Reality, your source for news, leaks, and insights about games and the gaming industry. It is April 5th, 2019. This is the Friday edition of the show. I always love the Friday edition of the show. I love the Tuesday edition too, but Friday, there's just something fun and casual and exciting about Friday. I guess, you know, we've got the weekend coming up, but for some reason, lots of great news tends to drop on Fridays too, so it's always exciting. Anyway, welcome to everybody who is already active in the live chat. And if you're listening live today, please say hello in the live chat. Send us your questions and comments there as well. We'll read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. And don't forget to slam that like button. It likes it rough. And it tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. If you're listening after the fact on one of the audio-only platforms, we're glad you're here as well. We appreciate your likes and follows. It does take us a couple of days to get the podcast up to the audio platforms. So if you want to get the latest info sooner, we encourage you to hit the link in that description to subscribe to the Triple S League YouTube channel. And as I said, I'm Asheninity. Actually, I don't know if I said that, but that's who I am, and I'm here as always with Cybsidian, that font of all things factual. My wife told me today, she was like, how does he become like this random this vault, this spewing well of random facts? She heard us talking on the phone earlier, so she was like, so, any insights into that, oh wise one?
Basically become half robot.
Yeah.
At the very least. That's a first start, and then hook your mind up with, like, basically every encyclopedia that's ever been written. Interesting factoid about me. So, I'm autistic. I've got some other defects as well. But one of the interesting things during my schooling, because I was having such a problem in my early years with certain things, one of the book reading projects that I was given to help me like focus was to read through the dictionary and the encyclopedia. And I'm not kidding. That
Weird.
was a school project. So I spent every 2 years I would read through the entirety of the dictionary and then all of the encyclopedias. We had two major encyclopedias. So an encyclopedia, for those of you who are, you know, in the majority of the millennial and Z generation, an encyclopedia is basically what Wikipedia is, except in book form. And they're very heavy and they're very, very big, and there are lots of stuff in them, and they're often not filled with as many fun pictures as you would.
People used to have entire shelves in their home dedicated to these,
Yeah.
because they'd be like
Yeah.
massive, many volumes. People used to go around selling them. That was even before my time, though.
Yeah, so because I have the memory of a elephant times two, basically most of that stuck with me. So growing up, I was always like, how do you not know how nuclear medicine works? Like, I mean, I read this when I was like 8, and then I did, you know, several follow-up studies on it since then. Like, does not everybody know what nuclear medicine is?
No. However, we do know how to pronounce nuclear. So we've got that going for us. All right. Hello, Whisper808, Sword Sister, Dead by Default, Reed, Leonine, Simon, 2 Questions, Randall. What's cracking? Lots of fun stuff. And I look forward to your second question.
We're officially...
you see what I did there?
We're officially in the Twilight Zone. I just want to say this. Like news today and over the past couple of days, this is Twilight Zone. I made a tweet about this yesterday. We're like, this is officially like Twilight Zone universe now. I don't know how we got here. I don't know if there was some portal or something, but good Lord.
Yeah, I don't know. We can't get into all the stuff we're talking about because a lot of it is heavily political, but yeah, interesting conversation before we started here today, that's for sure. But we will be talking about one Twilight Zone-ish aspect of that relates to gaming. All right, everybody else who's talking in the chat, I know I didn't get to everybody there, but we've got to get to our topics for today. So, of course, you see it in the title, you see it on the thumbnail there. Is it game over for Anthem? We're going to get into that. We're going to get into the Jason Schreier report from earlier this week, talking about Anthem's development problems, what's going on there, and then Casey Neistat's response to it all. Plus, Cyb has been in contact with all of his contacts in the industry, and we
Yeah.
have several contacts at BioWare, so we've gotten some insight into that as well. So we're going to talk about that, how it's affecting Dragon Age 4. We're also going to talk about this ongoing discussion about, you know, a game like Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Is it too hard? And is it disrespectful to gamers? Should they put more accessible difficulty levels? Is it even an accessibility issue for people who have disabilities? Or do people just need to get good? We're going to get into all of that and sort of discuss all sides of it because it's a complicated issue. But to start off today, I saw somebody mention Fallout 76 in the chat there. Yes, there are big updates coming to Fallout 76, but there's been something reported that is looking a little concerning as well. But we'll talk about the good and the bad with that. Why don't we just start with Fallout 76? This is not in the title or anything because this kind of just dropped on our plate. But why don't you give us an overview, Saib, of the what is coming down the pipe for Fallout 76, and then we'll get into the what's concerning. But let's start with the good stuff.
Well, I mean, overall, like, they're moving the game in like, up until this announcement, they're really moving the game in a really good direction. Like, they've embraced you know, a lot of the changes that the players are demanding. They're really moving in the direction of trying to fix issues. They're not letting this game go. They're actively working on it. There's a large team that is actively working on it. They sold over 2 million copies. We know this now, for the most part guaranteed. There's some people who are like, you know, they're calling Bethesda liars when it comes to, you know, the fact that they have millions of players in Fallout. That's so technically that's true. Did they sell all 2 million copies at the highest price that they wanted to? The answer to that is no. So, and that's where there's like, that's where some people are making a distinction between, like, you know, the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. The letter of it is, yes, they did sell more than 2 million copies. The part of that was, though, is that they gave away like 500,000 of those copies on either free other purchases like graphical cards, or people bundled it together, and this is basically, this is Bethesda sending out letters to, you know, people saying, hey, if you bundle this, we'll give you like a cut of it so that you don't take a total loss on it. And then they've given away a ton and all this other stuff. So yes, as far as the spirit goes, they didn't, this isn't the game of the year as far as sales goes, but it's also not accurate to say that it's not in the top 20 selling games. That list is an aggregate estimation score. The only person who knows exactly, or the only group of people who know exactly how many copies were sold at top value versus, sale versus deep sale versus sellout sale, is the people at Bethesda. And to say, it's not just 76 either. There's a lot of games on that list and a lot of games that are not on that one particular list that people are quoting that are not on that list because they don't have accurate sales numbers, because they don't give those numbers out. There's also, all kinds of stuff. So it's a little bit of truth this way, truth that way. It's how you want to interpret it, and it's really frustrating. It would be great, I think, if there was just a lot more transparency in the industry. That would be really, really awesome. It would be really nice to know exactly how many sales, at what level, at what time of the month. Like, this is information that I would just love to get my hands on. But unfortunately, the industry is built in such a way, that is built in such a way that that's not really a possibility. That's not really something that these companies want to share. They give away a little bit of trade secrets when they do this, and there's a bunch of other issues that follow up with this. And yeah, it's really messy. It's really slimy in some cases, and some people are really turned off by that, the word playing. But then the same people who are turned off by the word playing get involved in word playing themselves when they're going back and forth on various topics. So what I'm going to try to do is lay it out as logically and as unemotionally as it can. So, did the game sell more than 2 million copies? The answer to that is yes. Was it received well? Of course not. Are they abandoning the game to just, a small dev team to just keep it live and pump milk more money out of the players who are playing that? The answer to that is no. They are committing a larger team to it. It's not the core, Maryland studio team, but they are committing a large team to it to keep it running, to add new content. They are adding more stuff that players are demanding. Are they going back on their word as far as like what they promised the store would or would not contain? A little bit. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we also don't know the full truth on it. Is it something that the community should be outraged about? Yes, very much so. Anytime a developer starts going off on a goose chase, trying to chase more money, we as the community should be like, oh, hold on. We're not against you making money, but we're really against you going back on your word. And this is really what bothers us with this one particular thing. But should people be allowed to make money? Well, of course, right? Should we encourage the proper development of this game? I think yes, because if not, then other than mods for existing Fallout games, we're not going to get any new Fallout content for maybe up to 10 years. And I would really, really rather not have that happen. I would really rather have the interest stay quite high, and I would really rather see this game go through an evolution where it is what it is today, which is fairly buggy, lots of issues, lots of generalized directional issues with the game, but somewhere where we can land, because I'm a big fan of the Fallout series. We have somebody who helped create the original Fallout 2, is going to be answering some questions that we have. That will be something that will be really exciting for people to pay attention to. So heads up on that. Mm-hmm. We have a big interview coming. That'll hopefully be Tuesday, but it might be Friday next week. So we'll see where that goes. There's some scheduling and some issues with that. Yeah. But this is really exciting. I told you we have good context. We always have good context.
Mm-hmm. What is that? What you said earlier? What's that line from Spaceballs? Spaceballs 2: The Search for More Money.
Yeah. We don't want companies to do that, because that's how you lose genres. That's how you lose intellectual properties, when you try to force something to be what it's not and you move away from what made it good. Mm-hmm. And in all honesty, it's really upsetting. In all honesty, if I were at the helm, of course things would be different. I never would have done Fallout 76. Never. If I was at the helm, my next project would have been a game that you could play on PC and on mobile devices that was basically like a Fallout 2 type thing. Isometric, isometric 3D, and you could rotate the camera if you really wanted to, but also like just kind of more or less bring back that strategy play, and introduce people to a long continuous story that way. And I would have done something similar to that if I did not have like the ability to make like a full-fledged AAA thing. And really that's what they should have done.
Yeah, and you could do that on a parallel track. You could have those strategy type games coming out, as well as the full 3D RPGs.
Yeah.
And that would appeal to multiple audiences, yeah.
Yeah, and that's just absolutely where the industry needs to go generally, is we need to really open up our minds and try to embrace something that's a little bit better as far as what is available right now to gamers. What is available on like the app stores are mostly just money grabs and asset flips. It's the same game over and over and over and over again, and out of boredom and out of frustration, sometimes I play them because it's like, well, there's nothing else that's good on this market, and I can't carry my PC with me everywhere I go. But things like that are slowly changing.
Yeah. So what do you see coming down the pipe for Fallout 76 that's looking good?
So what's looking good is there are two major patches that we're going to see this year. They're looking good. I don't know if they will arrive good. I really need to make that distinction. They're looking good for the moment. For the moment, they're moving in kind of a good-ish direction. But from a perspective of like whether or not they can actually implement that remains to be seen.
Okay.
So overall, it's like plus the major one with friends. It appears as if that's going to feature some NPCs and some characters, and you're going to have some additional stuff like that going in that direction. And I'm really hopeful for that because I think that's something that can be done and can be done well. But I really think that, you know, fast forward 2 or 3 years from now, I think this game will be worth it, as long as they keep on it, because through both trial and error, they're making the game better slowly. Now this today with this news, kind of a big error step. So the news today is that they didn't really explain it really well, and I feel that this is where some people are really upset because we don't understand what they're actually meaning. They said, hey, so guys, we're basically going to be giving you some repair kits, and you're going to be able to buy them on the store.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it technically says the basic repair kits will be unlockable in the Atom shop, and so that is a little unclear what that means.
Yes,
does it mean
and I think a lot of people
are recipe. Does it mean you're actually? Does it unlock them and for loot drops? Like, what does that mean even?
Yeah. So here's how they can salvage this. If they really want to salvage this, they'll pop up the recipe on the Atom store for like 50 Atom, which you can make in like an hour playing the game, or 100 Atom, or whatever. As long as it's less than 500 Atom or 500 and below, and it's the recipe, and you just pop on and buy it, and then boom, you learn it. I think most people will say, okay. I mean, I guess that's kind of okay-ish. But the hardliners will say, you still have something in the store that you promised you wouldn't put there when you announced this game.
Yeah, they promised
when
no.
you announced the game, you said no game-changing stuff. Period. And lo and behold,
here it goes. Stuff. I mean, this is their second tiny baby step into this foray. Like was the Unstoppables before, the Unstoppable costumes that would give you a buff if you're in a group of people with different costumes from this group. It's like the Avengers group in the Fallout world. So these costumes that would give you I think it was an XP buff. But then
no, it was hit points buff. So so if you were in a group with 4 people, you had a maximum gain of 60 hit points. In a team versus team fight, that's 240 hit points.
Yeah, so that was the first.
That's a pretty big difference. Yeah. In a straight up, which means you're selling power, and gamers hate when you sell power. They're
even
okay with selling cosmetics. They're okay with selling even classes from time to time, but selling straight up power is something that most people are against. The original concept behind the whole like microtransaction like 8 years ago was, look, there's people who have lots of time but no skill. Then there's people who have lots of skill but little time. And then you also have another group of players that have neither of those but they have lots of money. So can we not offer which we're going to talk about when we talk about Sekiro, can we not give accessibility to everybody by offering a store where you can purchase this kind of stuff? But the problem is that anybody who has money can gain that as an advantage over an existing advantage.
Yes.
So if you have both money, time, and skill, then you basically can mop the floor with anybody because you're using all 3 of those things towards your advantage. And this is like, in MMOs, this is really, really, really terrible. It's like, it's really bad in general. It creates an environment where there's, by trying to create more equality, they create less. And you have this wildly different ceilings from one player to another. Now we're going to talk about that, and that overall is not a bad thing, having it so that where your ability to perform is better than the average Joe's ability to perform, and why you performing better is actually a good thing for games in general. However, when it comes across as a money thing, especially when it's attached to several $100s at a time, it gets rough. It gets really rough.
If you could imagine, say, back in the NES or Super NES era, it would be like a company making a really hard game, and you know how they built cheat codes into your games for whatever reasons, and people would discover these. But it would be like them saying, okay, mail us $10 and we'll send you this cheat code that you can use, and to get ahead. It just comes across as really scummy. It's just a money grab, because then you're like, well, you're just going to make your game really hard and then sell us cheat codes. This is kind of essentially what's happening. I mean, I get the argument what you're talking about, being able to buy, pay a little extra to bring some balance to, for people who don't have a ton of time, who don't want to, or even don't want to grind, like people used to pay other people to grind their characters in World of Warcraft. As they put it
or
on.
your kids. I knew a guy who punished his daughter whenever she'd like mess up or would like be disrespectful or whatever. He'd make her grind 5 levels as a holy priest in vanilla, which if you leveled up as a holy priest, you knew how really frustrating that was. I talked to him a little while ago, and he said that she still plays games and that she likes a really hard challenge now. And so that's kind of interesting that happened.
That's interesting.
As a direct result of the form of punishment that he chose, which was to basically make somebody have a really, really hard time inside a video game. It's like,
just picture that. Yeah, whenever I get in trouble, my dad makes me play a video game. So, I get in trouble a lot. But yeah, so anyway, we need some more clarity on what Bethesda means here by, unlocking repair kits in the Atom shop. And I wonder if that's deliberately vague, because they're very specific about what these things do. They're repair kits you can carry around with you, and you can repair any item on the fly without having to go back and find a workbench or go to your camp or whatever. So you can, you can repair things on the fly, which, in a PvP fight would get you a bit of an advantage. So the question is, what does this mean? And even if it just means that you unlock the recipe in the Atom shop, that's still a pay for power. Even though it's a small price, you might argue, okay, this is really a small amount of power you're purchasing, but this is a small step in the wrong direction. And they're talking about different, they're talking about other, what they call community-driven ideas to the game. But it's under the heading of the repair kits in the Atomic shop. So this is it's a little concerning, the direction they're going. We do need more clarity on it, though. So we'll be keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah. Basically, the other thing that's annoying about this story is that it's just this constant, like, hate cycle. And I don't like feeding into it. When I first saw the news pop up, I was like, crying out loud, why again? Can we just, like, seriously, can we just have a month where there's not something to bash on Bethesda and them for? But I guess maybe in retrospect, maybe they do need it. Maybe they do need a constant battering to,
Well, it looked like they were starting to move in the right direction with them declaring that a bunch of their future games are going to be releasing on Steam. They're not going in the direction of Epic exclusives, which is fantastic, but they're going to be releasing Fallout 76 on Steam. They're going to be releasing a bunch of their upcoming games, Rage 2, the Wolfenstein games that are coming. They're going to be releasing these on Steam, so they're not even just pushing their own launcher anymore. So this is a good sign. This is a good thing. We were happy to hear. This is a step in the wrong direction. Now, granted, it's a decently large company where there's probably, you've got different teams of people making different decisions on things, and so, it's not necessarily the same person waking up and saying, hey, let's add this to the Atom shop, and also making decisions about where they're going to distribute their games. Like, those are completely different areas of the company. But anyway, we're going to have to keep our eye on this. Bethesda, we like what we've seen, some of what we've seen from you recently, but, you still need to watch your step, because there's some, you still need to watch your step. Let's put it that way. You're not out of the woods yet in terms of your reputation in the industry. So anyway, let's move on to talking about another one of our favorite B studios that, B as in it starts with B, that has fallen from grace, BioWare. So
Yeah.
Jason Schreier, of course, from Kotaku, had a pretty impactful report that he released, talking about all the problems that plagued the development of Anthem, and so there was all kinds of content about it this week. Basically, the game suffered from a lack of direction for most of its development cycle, and it suffered from changes in direction and mismanagement, management switching, like actual personnel switching, who was in charge, that kind of a thing. And so there was also a lot in that report about the situation at BioWare in terms of the company environment and how healthy it was. Lots of talk of mental health issues and stress and that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And we've been digging into this on our end. Of course, we have contacts at BioWare and elsewhere in the industry.
I also need to say in general, Jason Schreier is good, and he's been universally panned as, this is an amazing piece of work, etc., etc., etc. Jason Schreier is not perfect, and by any stretch of the imagination, I would not trust him completely on any article that he writes, because he's actually written before that, there's one really egregious quote that he said that was just it.
The one about objectivity?
Objectivity is something that we shouldn't have. It's like, oh, really? Really? Okay. And he still believes that to this day.
Something like, it's objectivity is a foolish thing to strive for. Something to that effect. I believe it was a tweet he sent out. I don't have it in front of me right now, but yeah, that's quite a thing for a journalist to say, that you shouldn't strive for objectivity. Anyway, so also, I mean, it's Kotaku. It's written to get clicks, so it could be a little bit sensationalized, but that doesn't mean that all of the factual stuff in it isn't correct. And in fact, there is a lot correct. But you discovered, Saib, in talking to people at BioWare and digging into other areas in the industry, that it's generally correct, but a little bit exaggerated, a little bit overblown.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So first of all, the way that he kind of put it, and why BioWare tried to push back originally, was that he basically made it sound like the entire studio's on fire and that everybody's suffering from like major stress-related issues that are, and the stress leave that's doctor mandated, and that people were just literally crying in closets all the time. Overall, this is not true. This is an inaccurate portrayal, one that he really hammed up in the article. After speaking with several BioWare people, I can confirm that that it is an issue, and we don't need to let that fall by the wayside either. The issue is straight up, after speaking with several developers, a little under 10 just right now. Basically, the answer to the question of whether this one particular report is true, the average feeling that I'm getting is that, yeah, for the most part, it's true. That people knew people who had either taken a day or two off because of stress, or who had some issues that they kind of had to deal with because of this, and that most of them knew at least one person that they had heard a rumor was crying in a closet. But I mean, this is not a 1,000-person studio where, when you say that, it could be everybody. Somebody crying in the closet could literally be, the same person that 20 people or 30 people or 40 people know, right?
Right.
So because it's a smaller condensed area, this kind of stuff, I mean, gets around and can sometimes be a little bit overblown when you're hearing it from a bunch of minor sources, all giving you kind of the same story, but then you track that into its own event every time you hear it, meaning that there's like 40 or 50 people who are crying in a closet. Truth is that that number could be a whole lot lower. It could be 50, and this is the thing that we don't know for sure, because not every single person is reporting back on this. So I need to be really careful, because again, none of this is cool. None of this is acceptable. However, it was overblown. I think basically the consensus that I got was it was fairly stressful, but not anything that's not uncommon for the industry. And now this brings up the third tie into this, is that because this is kind of a common thing industry-wide, that's a bit of a problem. I've been in a lot of stressful jobs. I'll be heading back to one here during the summertime, where every year people break down and can't make it. It's one of the highest turnaround jobs that I've ever been in. And I know people who've had massive issues. Every year there's like, number of people, and about halfway through the year, out of the new people, like, if there's like 10 new people, just using a nice round number, usually by like half the year, half of them are gone. So like gone as in like full on like stress breakdowns, then they've left. It's partially because this particular job is extremely stressful and is extremely dangerous, and there's lots and lots of fatalities every year. So the pressure to keep yourself up near the top is like, I mean, it's really 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 hard, and then to stay there is even harder. And yeah, it could be quite stressful, but at the same time, it's like, if you do it right, then nobody dies and everybody goes home happy at the end of the day, and that's a good thing. So I can't reiterate enough that this is not abnormal as far as work goes. Work is stressful and it is annoying. That's unfortunately the way that most people pay their bills. Is that fair or is that right? Well, not necessarily, but it's not confined to this one industry. Then the way that it was kind of put, it's like, this never happens in any other place. Well, no, that's not true. This happens in literally every job. I mean, I've seen employees at coffee shops, like ritzy, non-busy coffee shops, have people break down and sob behind the till. And it's so that bringing that in as a blunt force trauma to use against BioWare is not necessarily accurate in general, but it's still not okay that that's happening. Am I making it clear?
I think so. So it's
I'm not.
It's not okay, but it's not uncommon either.
Yes,
and we've heard lots about the gaming industry in that. Like we had a similar conversation surrounding CDPR at one point.
Yes, and now I want to bring this in because there's some direct comparisons to bring in. So is gaming stressful? Yes. Anytime you have a deadline, things are going to get stressful. I mean, you should look at like normal like newspaper journalism back in the 80s and 90s. Things were incredibly stressful. You look at high pressure retail, not retail, like land selling and that kind of stuff. It's just insane and difficult and full of pressure in every possible direction. And again, these things are normal stuff that most people have to work with and deal with in their everyday job. So it's a little unfair for him to say again that, oh, this is happening here and that's it. So when we dug into what was going on at CDPR, we found out quite quickly that the bulk of the stories that were coming out of there from one particular source, who, funny enough, was using a single source, turns out that was entirely blown out of proportion. And that, through the most part, there was some generalized stress, but nothing as nearly as bad as what was being brought up. And we covered that in pretty good detail. And we encouraged the developers to like take a breath and say, we don't need to push people. And that goes the same, if not doubly, for BioWare. It's like, look, you don't have to push people. That's how you got here. That's the problem that happened. They talked about a couple of the really good parts that Jason did put in the article, which were very accurate, was a couple of things. One, there was no real direction. Meetings would happen, and they would talk about problems, and then there would be zero solutions. Nobody would take the helm. Nobody would say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And those but what would happen is these team leaders would then go back to their teams and who would like go on the weekend and then come back after playing a brand new game. And this is reported both at CDPR and in other places where these team leaders would come back, go, oh, I just played this game and it was so awesome. I want to add this and this and this from the game, and just basically trying to replicate something that somebody else is already doing, but then trying to replicate it in a way that it wasn't a blatant ripoff, but then it just became useless because it wasn't a blatant ripoff. It was something that they were trying to shoehorn into this kind of weird way, which ultimately ended up not being what they were trying to go for anyways. It's like this is an industry standard problem, and it really hit BioWare really hard in this. And this I confirm from all my sources, going, basically everybody is looking at the post-mortem of this going, yeah, that's exactly what happened. A bunch of the team leaders had no idea what they were doing. They were doing really dumb stuff, coming in saying, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to add this because I played it in a new game. And they went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on so many designs. I mean, flight was originally not a thing, then it was a thing, then it was not a thing, then it was a thing again, then it was not a thing, then it was a thing again. It's like, good Lord, what, like, God.
And that was an interesting,
why?
yeah, I watched a video that went into detail about that and how, they kept flip-flopping on whether or not they were going to include the flight mechanic, but that affects your whole level design. You make that one decision. It's not just like, oh, we're going to turn on flight and let people fly around. Well, now you have to change everything because you don't want. Yeah.
And the silly thing about this all is that it affected a bunch of like pseudo things that didn't affect the core gameplay, like the enemies. The enemies are basically the same freaking enemies that we've had in Mass Effect games since the first Mass Effect. It's like, dude, have you not like evolved at all? On this, have you not learned anything? Like, good Lord, it's just silly insanity over and over and over and over again. And this is where, I mean, Jason really hit it on the head on this one particular part, is that they were apparently basically rudderless during this whole development process, and they kept on screwing up in random directions. When I talked to some people, I was like, so what did you do for like 3 years? And it's like, well, there was a lot of like going back and forth on the same design over and over again with no real direction or concept as to where we were going to stay with it. It's like, and you did this for 3 years? Like, good Lord.
And this was supposed to be their magnum opus. They thought this was going to be the game they were remembered for. Not talking about like your average developer at the company, but the higher ups.
This is what the leadership thought was. This was going to be this, and the idiot who was running EA at the time, who basically was pushing them back and forth on these design decisions. Complete moron, complete idiot. Didn't know what he was doing. Still doesn't know what he's doing. I will retain that he is probably one of the worst effects in gaming period ever. He's a pathetic shrew who doesn't know what he's doing, and he's blatantly playing with people's jobs, and he doesn't even understand the core concept of a lot of the finer points when it comes to gaming. Like, here's something that's really important that I barely hear any developers talk about. I was at the GDC a few years ago, and I gotta say, when we bring up the issues of retention and accessibility and favorability, these are core concepts that make or break games, and there are big producers, big studio executives who don't even understand the basic concept of it. It's like, how crap are you at your job when you don't even spend the time? It's like a rocket scientist not understanding gravity. It's like you have a guy who's in the charge of the rocket department designing and trying to push the team to develop a rocket where he has no understanding of gravity or G-force. And he's like, why don't we make the whole thing on the inside out of mahogany? Mahogany, I mean, just think about how nice that would look.
It'd be so classy.
It's like, and it wouldn't stand the first 5 seconds of thrust, you Goram idiot. Like, come on, this is absolutely retarded. Like, you are talking like a child right now. And I can't tell you how many times, which is why I get so pissed off when I talk about analysts and when I talk about the big company executives, that they just don't know what they're doing. And they're in these positions because of, I have no idea why. I have no idea why any company with any amount of like stockholder influence, where the board of directors or the stock voters in general would get together and say, hey, let's hire somebody who has no idea what they're doing but made a lot of money for this other company. It doesn't always work like that, especially in a very nuanced industry like gaming. It's mind-blowingly disgusting that he would come in, interject himself into the creation of this game, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. He's giving basically his rough opinion, of which he is not a gamer. He doesn't play games full time. He's not he doesn't understand what the player base wants. He's not a streamer. He doesn't understand what the driving impact of interaction is. He doesn't understand long-term retention, because he makes games that are basically like just quick asset flips. And it's just and it's just disgusting. And they sit there and they bring this out again and again and again, saying that, oh no, we know what we're doing. We know what we're looking for. We know where the industry is going. You don't. You've been driving it into the ground, and the only reason why it hasn't completely crashed is because there's enough new blood in it that rotates in and out. And this is true in BioWare's case. There's enough new people that come in that give their everything, and that is basically the only thing that holds the game together. Fortnite was a mode that was suggested by like 5 people at the company. Those 5 people at the company, and god darn it, now looking back on it, you're like, oh, well, maybe it would have been better if they kept their mouth shut, because then we wouldn't be having these issues with the Epic Store right now that we're having. But these 5 people at the company basically said, you know, we got to turn this Fortnite, which had a miserable launch. It was really not doing well. Let's make a battle royale mode. And they pushed it through, and there was a couple of people at the company who were like, no, this isn't gonna fly. This is a terrible idea. Okay? You know, look, we understand what we need to make is an arena game, like Battleborn or you know, Overwatch, because those games are doing really well. You know, and it's these idiots standing in the back who don't know what they're doing, but it's the new blood who are like, no, I have an idea, I have a vision. Well, not just the new blood, it's the veterans who understand the industry as well. And they're just sitting there going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until they finally come out with something, they put it out, and then it's amazing. And then it's those same idiots who are like, no, this isn't going to work, who go to the stockholders and the business execs. Oh, it was totally my idea, of course. Brilliant. I'm only the best people. And it's like, oh, you're disgusting. You're disgusting.
Indeed.
It's just
wow.
it's just gross. So overall, Jason pretty much he got a lot of things right. And I don't want to dilute that. I have issues with Jason. I have issues with Kotaku. I have issues with the way that they don't respect certain things that should be respected. I definitely have an issue with the way that they throw in politics into it so flippantly. And it's the industry is not better because of it. It's like God, none of this stuff is better because of it, of throwing this kind of crap into it. But in this particular case, the best thing that's come out of this is what most of everybody I talked to said the same thing. Now people are talking about it, and they're able to talk about it more often in more places. One of the guys mentioned that while he was sitting around at lunch, he said something, and everybody kind of laughed at it. That's something that I don't think they would have done or could have done before this had happened, before this article came out. So now there's far more people confirming and talking with other outlets and other sources and other people in the industry. People are far more willing to. As soon as this was out, my inbox started to fill up basically of just people wanting to talk, and it's like that doesn't normally happen. So now that it's out there, everybody's kind of breathing easier. The general consensus is we're not going to do this again. We're not going to make the game a new game in the same kind of way. We can't trust BioWare magic, quote unquote, to just have the product finish in the last 3 months and wrap into this perfect little package that we've been hoping and praying would happen. That's not the case anymore. And I think that overall, I think this was generally a good thing that it got out. People started talking about it. It's not as bad as he said in a couple of places, but it's still pretty bad. And that defense, the original defense of BioWare, trying to defend the first time they came out, which they put out 16 minutes after the Kotaku report went out. And they basically was just a lot of, well, we know what we're talking about, and Jason can't be trusted, and all this kind of garbage stuff. That only hurt their message. If the message that Casey put out yesterday or early this morning, depending on where you are in the world, if that message had gone out first, it would have been so much better. It would have been so much better. It would have been received a lot better. People would have rallied. Instead, what you had is a lot of people saying, I'm sorry, you're refusing this? Well, I just called up a couple people at BioWare, and they basically, broke down and said it was mostly true. So now it makes them look worse than they actually are.
Right.
Like if they had come out and been truthful right from the get-go, going, so let's be truthful. The game, while in development since 2012, was basically not set. In fact, the trailer that we showed you at E3 was basically just the core concept.
Yeah, and that was interesting to learn too. That basically that what they showed at E3 2017 was just that's all they had.
It was basically a mock-up. There was a single mission that they showcased. There was basically nothing to the entirety of what was going on. They couldn't make a lot of the things happen the way that they wanted to. And it just got worse from there. And it's like,
yeah,
ugh.
BioWare magic
so how this affects
is a thing that I think. I mean,
do you want to read his response, by the way?
Well, maybe part of it. I hadn't really decided. I think you've covered it really well, so I'm not sure how much of this would be worth reading. But this is actually something that Casey Neistat circulated internally. Casey
Neistat? No.
Or not Casey Neistat. I'm sorry. Casey.
He's a YouTuber, blogger.
I knew. It's just signed Casey here. I don't know why I immediately went to Neistat. Casey. What's his last name now? Now I'm stuck on Neistat. Anyway, Casey, the guy in charge over at BioWare there. Basically,
Hudson.
Casey Hudson sharing his thoughts about the Kotaku article. And he acknowledges that a lot of the problems are real and that it's their top priority to continue working to solve them. He doesn't like that that Schreier basically named specific developers as targets for public criticism. That's what he claims here. And I think that's kind of reasonable. If you want to read the full statement, there's another. Jason Schreier has basically released a follow-up article in which he includes this internal memo. So it wasn't exactly. It was a response to his first article in Kotaku, but it wasn't a public response. It was one that he circulated internally, basically. But the gist of it is kind of, yes, we know there's problems. We think that they were a little harsh with us, but we are working to make BioWare better. We're working to make future games better.
So let me respond to a couple of questions in the comments here. This one, which feeds into more or less where I wanted to go with this. Dark Hollow asks, how much fault is EA that forced them to use the Frostbite engine, and how much of it is BioWare's fault? So basically, a lot of issues that stem from this is that EA just gave no support when working on and DICE gave next to no support while working on the Frostbite engine. They had to create a lot of their tools from scratch. They still have a vast tool set missing. I spoke with one of the developers specifically about this, and then I spoke to two of the programmers about this, and they said the same thing. The tools in Frostbite are either non-existent or don't work. They're designed for shooters, and they're designed for, that's about it. It's really all they're designed for. This kind of shooter / FIFA kind of stuff, and that's it. Is basically the only existing tool set that was in existence, and I mean, one of those tool sets was basically nothing. So the engine, while it could potentially maybe rival, the Unreal Engine one day, or while it might be more visually better than some of the engines that are out there, ultimately the tools and what you can do with it are basically nothing. If I gave you the finest brick of mortar and gave you a flat palmed hammer to carve out an image with, you'd be lucky if you could carve anything even remotely nice looking. But if I gave you a full toolkit of 150 different types of chisels, hammers, and sanders and sculpting tools, then even as a moderate artist, you could create something far better out of a lump of saggy rock than you could out of the finest brick of marble that I give to the best artist that has no tools.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really, I actually really like that metaphor. And that's really what it boils down to, is that they just didn't have the tools to create. It's like giving a painter a perfect canvas in one color. It's like, how much can you do with that? Not much, actually. Right. And that's the biggest problem. That's the problem that they encountered, was that they just didn't have the tools. Now, going forward to Dragon Age 4, they're using the same toolkit and the same assets and the same code base as for Project Morrison, which is the next Dragon Age.
They're actually using the Anthem. They're using Anthem as their code base for Dragon Age 4. And by the way, this is an answer to...
No, they're using the Anthem code base. Very different than using Anthem or Anthem assets. And that really, I really want to explain this properly, because a lot of people don't understand the difference.
I just want to respond to Frogget67's question here, because this answers the question kind of, will BioWare survive this crisis, or will EA shut them down? Well, they're going to survive, because they are, like Saib just said, they're working on the next Dragon Age game. I mean, unless EA makes a drastic decision, but as it's looking right now, and Saib got the impression from his contacts that they feel like their jobs are pretty secure.
EA cannot possibly handle another major loss. If they were to can BioWare wholly, let's say they killed off both of the Prime studios and they basically just sunk everything else, they'd basically be dropping their entire game lineup to Battlefield and a handful of sports games. They literally can't do that anymore. They're in a box that they've put themselves into, and if they were to finish that off, then there's a very good chance that the outcry and also their lineup would be so broken that they wouldn't recover. And that's kind of more or less where they're at right now. 5-6 years ago, if this had happened, yeah, they definitely might have pulled the trigger. But in this particularly, they understand that they're in big trouble. EA's not been having a good year financially. The only thing that potentially came out to save them was Apex. Apex had this huge wave. It's like this rogue wave out of nowhere. It's just this huge, massive thing, just gigantic and beautiful, and they thought that they were going to replace Fortnite, and the numbers are really lacking. In the last 2 weeks, the numbers have dropped drastically for Apex Legends. Apex Legends is down to they're down to number 6 now on the streaming list, and they're only holding that position by a few thousand views. Gameplay wise, and number of people that are playing it, originally they said, we got like 30 million players. Yeah, man, they're down to less than 1 million now. So they're in trouble, and they know it. They can't. They got caught doing a bunch of other stuff recently with some view botting and some other stuff, and there's now been some accusations that Apex was artificially boosted with several things. This is something that I don't know if it'll get out fully or not. I'm not gonna guarantee you that, so just take that with a grain of salt. But they're not in a good position. Like, Dota 2 is above them, for crying out loud. It's like, okay.
Right. All right. So, but let's get back to the Anthem code base and what all that means.
So the Anthem code base is basically the tools, the systems that they created, and a bunch of other things. Does this mean that we're basically going to get like an Anthem 2.0 inside Dragon Age? And the answer to that is no. There's not going to be flying. There's not going to be like, well, there could be flying. There's dragons and stuff in the game. There's griffins in the game actually that they have not covered for really like that was in the original like core content of some of the books. They had griffins and they had like these flying birds and stuff like that. But that's not something that they've added into the game so far. With 4, they might, but I doubt it. So just kind of, yeah.
Right.
As far as generally speaking, the code base is going to allow them to basically create better games a little bit faster now that they have a handle on the code base, and they're bringing in some more people to build more tools for them so that they can make it. If they really pour their heart and soul into working on tools and making the engine work for them for what they need it to, they could theoretically catch up and put out a really decent next Dragon Age game. Especially if they buckle down, and especially if Casey got a handle on everything. They're going to lose quite a lot of people. As soon as the bonuses for Anthem go out, they're going to lose a fair number of people. And then because BioWare Edmonton is moving buildings, once they move over to the new building, they might lose a lot more people. There's some talk going on at the company that there's a lot of people who are planning on leaving the company when they transfer, because they'd have to move anyways, and they have better job offers in other places. So they might just, they might move to a different country or move to a different place and go from there instead of having to move up. Like if you're going to move from one side of the city to the other, the temptation to just move to a brand new city, and especially if you're offered like, job security for a year or two, and you're offered like, 20 or 30% more than you're making currently, that's a real tempting offer, especially if you don't have anything tying you down here at the current location that you're working at. If you can move and transfer over, then why not? So
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. So yes. So we don't need to. There's questions. Do you think Dragon Age 4? This is from Dark Hollow. Actually, this is a good question. Do you think the Dragon Age 4 will be single player focused, or will they try to do something on the multiplayer side?
It's going to be both.
And then Bloker
it's
710.
not gonna. I don't think it'll play out like Anthem does, where it's like your main story, but then you go out and it's mostly multiplayer based. I don't think that's going to happen.
So basically, the main
that's definitely
point,
not going to happen. But there is going to be a substantial multiplayer component to it. They have been wanting for quite a while to create kind of like a high fantasy type, spammable multiplayer game. Anthem's, the Frostbite engine, if they can get it working, it's a sizable bet. It might work. It might. Maybe. We'll see.
Well, and this is where using the Anthem code base will actually be an advantage to them.
Yeah.
And so the main point here is don't be alarmed when you hear that it's using the Anthem code base. That is not a bad thing. That doesn't mean we're going to get the same game. All it means is that they're going to reuse chunks of code that work for the new game as well. Like all games have some things in common. Like all games have some menus, and they have graphics options, and they have,
a lot of that doesn't even exist in the current code base. So
right.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna get to HD gaming. I just about engines. I want to talk about how Unity put out their little video of their latest engine upgrade, and like, good lord, that thing outperforms Frostbite easily. It's and we've talked about this a number of times, where the insanity and the stupidity of these big companies to say, no, our code bases and our tool set that we've created is better than a code base or engine that's being created by literally tens of thousands of people around the world all at the same time. The fact that you think your piddly little engine can even compete against that is laughable, and this will continue to push the direction of the master engines out there. So yeah, and that's one thing that Bethesda has over top of a lot of these other places, is that you do have this step, this move towards this really, really cool system where there's so many people modding the game. There's so many people that are working on the system that you literally can outrank and you can outdo pretty much anybody, any major company by having the system where there's 10,000 people working on it publicly, making the game and making the engine better, making more tool sets for it. That's going to outrank what you can pay 30 people to do any day of the week. It's like, yeah. So,
all right, and yeah, let's get to so HDK Gaming's question here. Don't you think that the success of God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2, Outer Worlds, and Cyberpunk will show EA that well-made and polished single-player games are worth it? I almost read well-made and Polish single-player games, which almost fits there. Well-made and polished single-player games. P.S. Bring back that Star Wars game. There's another Star Wars game coming. Hopefully that'll be half decent. I would love another good Star Wars game.
I would like it, but I'm not holding my breath.
So long since there's been a good Star Wars game. But anyway, is this showing EA that well-made and polished single-player games are worth it?
Well,
it's
HDK, you are going to flip when you find out who our special guest is. Let me just lead off with that. You are going to lose your shit, man, when that comes out soon. So and we're really going to get into that in the next when that podcast lines up with the guest. As far as it goes, overall, the industry is pretty much spat in the face of the idea that single player games and single player story games are not a good thing. They really learned their lesson in the last 2 years when, the bulk of the best games, the bulk of the highest financial boosted games were that. And this is interesting, even when it comes to Fortnite is a narrative game, although they tell their narrative in a different way. The narrative story progresses and changes because of the map and the way that the map constantly evolves and changes and alters and tweaks and is created new and interesting things, and that's pretty cool. It's definitely something that's pretty awesome. So we'll put it like that. Is the general concept of it is fine, and it works. So yeah. I'll leave it there for now. The fact that basically EA thought that this was not going to work, and they thought that this was going to be bad, and blah 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 blah. But in all honesty, I think they've realized that they've hit a wall, and that they need to have more than. Remember when I was talking last week about how Microsoft knows that they screwed up, and then they need a plethora of stuff. They can't just shoot for the top 5 games. You couldn't even do that even if you had all the power in the universe. Having the top 5 games is not something that you can easily do. It just doesn't work unless you control the entire industry. You could definitely make a good attempt at it, and I mean, look at Disney, what they're trying to do. But just because you can or just because you try doesn't mean it's going to work. So which of the Captain Marvel versus Shazam. Well, if you're a financial person, you would back Shazam over Captain Marvel, even though, you've got all the money in the world behind this one idea and this one concept, and it's just the other one turns out better because it's just more fresh and it's funnier and it's better overall. Even though I'm not a DC fan at all, the only thing that DC offers is a very small handful of good characters, but great villains for the most part. And Marvel has the opposite effect.
Wonder Woman was pretty badass, you got to admit.
Yeah, no, it was
amazing.
It was a great film. Yeah, it was a great film. Shazam was a really great film. But in some of the cases, Marvel has great heroes, but overall it's which is why in the game universe it's really interesting. So I would rather play as my own created hero inside the DC universe than play in the Marvel world as a pre-generated hero, because it's just the fun, the interesting things of the DC universe is around their villains, and the world is not necessarily around their heroes. It's like Superman is one of the most boring heroes you could possibly imagine, and they've constantly run into problems because of that, because he's just an all-powerful human. Like, there was a point where he had no weaknesses in the past, and then anyway, I'm not going to get into comic book stuff. I'm not that much of a nerd.
Yes, you are. Don't lie.
Yeah, I am. So basically, yeah, that's basically a lesson that EA has learned, is that they need a plethora of stuff.
Have
if
they
want
though?
To compete.
They keep.
Well, this is what they've more or less realized. Whether or not they're going to stick with it, I don't know. Whether or not they learn from, like, they've been taught the lesson. Now it's whether they take the lesson to heart or not. And we're definitely going to see this over the next 2-3 years. But in all honesty, I have zero to little hope for anything EA related. I have a small glimmer of hope for BioWare, because I know a lot of people who work there. And that is only because of that. If I was on the outside, if I was like somebody who didn't know what was going on at the studio, I'd say, yeah, they're done. They're toast. Like, and this answers the question: is Anthem done? Short and fact point, yes, it's done. We're never going to get an Anthem 2. It's just there's nobody at the studio this is their baby. This was a handful of people's baby when it was originally conceived as this giant exploration game where you basically took portals, where you were on a planet, but portals would like port in things from other worlds and even like landscapes from other worlds, and that originally was the concept. That idea is dead and buried. It never got to be released. It got killed off early on, and it just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
What Anthem is right now, nobody's baby is this thing. Nobody's going out of the way to stump for this game. There's a small team who's been put on basically just to get the game running and like put out the small little content that they had pre-planned. This game is going nowhere. If you're still playing Anthem, you're playing a dead game. You're playing a game that's going to get 1 or 2 lore story updates, maybe a handful of new enemies, and that's it. I mean, financially, this thing's a bust. EA is not going to support it. They have a small micro studio on it that's going to try and milk you for every cent that you've got for a little while, but as soon as the game starts to go downhill, they're going to put it... I mean, it's already been moved to the back burner. A small team at Austin is now running the show, and they simply don't have the manpower to make any of the big changes that they, having had good success with online games and they know what they're doing, they're just stuck.
Right.
They're in a pothole and they can't get out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, unfortunate.
Looks like
very unfortunate, but that's the case.
Yeah.
So
we've got another Mass Effect Andromeda on our hands. Incredibly forgettable game that's just nobody's going to think about in a year.
Yeah.
So that's 2 in a row.
Yeah. So
3 strikes, you're out. Bethesda or BioWare, I mean.
3 strikes, you are out. If they fail in this, in the next Dragon Age game, if the next Dragon Age game does not move a ton of games, they don't move a ton of products, I will tell you exactly what will happen. There'll be talk about how, oh yeah, we're here to support BioWare. BioWare is a core component to our stuff, and then especially if they lose the Star Wars contract in 2-3 years, basically then they'll close up shop on the Old Republic, and they'll immediately close both studios, or they'll do this like, oh, we're merging the 2 studios, and they're gonna work on something awesome. Then 3 months later, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, we closed the studio. That is what's going to happen if the next Dragon Age game does not do bonkers numbers. If they don't hit it out of the park. If they hit it out of the park and they manage to stabilize themselves and they really stabilize their team and they really get into making good products and they can put out a new Mass Effect game probably like a year or 2 later, 18 months later, let's go with that. They can put out a new Mass Effect game, then they have potential to like get back into their back into their control. But by that point, this little tiny studio called Fogbank Entertainment is going to have released their game, which I think many of you are going to enjoy that game far more than you'll enjoy both a combination of a really good Dragon Age game and a really good Mass Effect game. I think, in all honesty, the new Fogbank is basically the new BioWare. And I mean that. It's, well, first of all, it is, legitimately. It's got all of the core people, minus, like, 5 people. So minus 5 people, the Fogbank Studios is what BioWare was when they were working on Mass Effect 1 and 2. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. You are listening to the Augmented Reality Podcast. We love seeing you all so active in the live chat. If you want to keep the conversation going after the live broadcast today, be sure to join our Discord server. You can find the link to that in the description below. It's a place where you can chat with us and other Triple S fans about all of the things we love to talk about and stay up to date about everything we're doing here at the Triple S League. And you can also, joke about memes and reminisce about old movies like Napoleon Dynamite. Vote for Pedro, everybody. Vote for Pedro. He promised me today that if he gets elected, he will repeal Article 13 and 11. And to know what the hell I'm talking about, you got to check out the Discord server. So check out the, go ahead and click the link in the description there. And we're going to move on to talking about something that's been dominating a lot of the Twitter feeds I've been seeing over the past few days. And that is the whole discussion surrounding Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Another incredibly hard-as-balls game from Software. And, of course, there's a lot of people enjoying how difficult it is. I love the game, and I just put out my review on it yesterday. So I recommend you check it out if you're at all interested in the game to see if you might like it or not. In my reviews, I try to, as well as entertain, I try to answer all the questions I think you're going to have about, are you going to like this game? And so I put front and center how hard this game is. Because I don't want somebody buying it and then deciding 3 hours in, this is too hard for me. And then, being beyond the point where they can get a refund on it if you buy it on Steam. So I made sure to put that front and center, but I also wanted to point out how much fun I'm having with it, because I'm having a ton of fun. But I like really hard games. I love Celeste. I beat all the Seasides on it. You can see it on the channel if you're interested. I like these really hard games. I loved Cuphead. Not everybody likes their games to be that level of difficulty, and that's totally fine. To each their own kind of a thing, right? But the question is, should game developers provide easier options for the people that want them? And is it even an accessibility issue for some people? As there's one very famous disabled gamer who was making the point that, it's an accessibility issue. For some people, it's not just that they don't enjoy difficulty. For some people, it's that they literally can't do what's required to play at that level of difficulty. And so there's a big discussion about this. We're going to try and talk about both sides of it. I just want to say right off the bat, there's some complaints about, the Dark Souls fan base, the fan base of sort of Dark Souls and Bloodborne, all of those really hard games from Software, kind of have a reputation about being defensive about how difficult the games are. And that sometimes goes into the realm of being toxic and putting others down. Of course, we're not in favor of that kind of a thing. But if we're just going to talk about the discussion and accessibility, I think it's a good conversation to have. But we're not going to be like, for myself, am not going to be like, well, get good, scrub. I think, if Sekiro looks like a game that you really enjoy but would like to have an easier option, or like Saib, you recommended earlier, maybe like a story mode, where it's not like an easy mode, but, you just want to play it for the environment and the story, and you're not interested in necessarily getting good. You know what? If you want that, I'm okay with that, I'm personally okay with that. I'm okay with people wanting what they want. I'm also okay with the developer saying yes or no as they see fit. But anyway, let's get into it. There's already a ton of comments coming through.
So
in our
overall,
chat about this.
So overall, we had a big discussion this morning on whether or not hard games are good for games.
Yeah.
And the answer to that, for both games and gamers, the answer to that is a strong yes. The harder it is to complete a particular thing within a game, the more people strive to do that. The more people strive to be on the top when there is a top to be had. Leaderboards and positions. I mean, it goes back all the way back to, it goes all the way back to arcade games. I remember playing an arcade game once where I got to see it every 6 months. And I played through it the first time, and I got into I think it was top 3 spot. I think it was number 2. And I would return every 6 months and look at the high scores. And each year, each 6 months, I came back for, I think it was four times in a row. My name was still up at number 2, meaning that nobody managed to beat me from where I had managed to originally put myself on the high score. And until I came back and the thing was gone. And that was when I was pretty young. And I really that immediately set in ooh, I like being good and I like being on the top. And I like, this is cool. I like this. And this is something that you had kind of disappear a little while ago. There was this big, everything should be inclusive and everybody should have access to everything. And WoW did this, which was which was one of the major factors that that dropped that game from having pushing close to 20 million active subscribers and players to being where it is today with little under 3 million. It's ugh. Where did they go wrong? Now there's more contributing factors to that. There's a lot more, and if they made the game go free to play, I think that active player base would jump through the roof. If they did a bunch of other things too, that would help. It's not just the one singular thing, but overall, when I played original vanilla WoW, I am one of the few players that cleared original Nax. I'm also one of the very few players, this is an even smaller number, who unlocked Hand of Adal twice, I might add. Hand of Adal is a title within the game that if you see somebody running around with that, they either A, bought their account, or B, they were at some point really, really good. Top 2% of the entire player base. And and that was solid work back then. It was hard to get that title because they also dropped it out a little bit sooner than they dropped some of the other stuff. There was an achievement that I got in Wrath that I looked up the other day, and less than 0.0002% of the population has it. And I was like, kind of funny. Now, mind you, those are quite a few years ago, and if you were to put that same challenge out now, just like how they're doing Vanilla WoW this summer, launching that, people are going to be able to clear stuff because there's guides and you just look up how to do the fights. Not to mention some of the fights people have memorized still from all those years ago. I'm still confident that I could do vanilla Nax and vanilla gear, and because it's most of it's muscle memory. I still have dreams where I play through the whole damn raid, and it's pretty normal. So does that positively impact the game overall? Does it positively impact the community? Yes, all the time. When people are at that top 1%, other people strive to get there. And that's hard and rare and not something that's easily done. And it takes dedication. It also takes the ability to learn. And that's what you have in Sekiro, is this, it's and I'm seeing this from a lot of people. Now, there are some people who are out there, get good, stop being trash. I bet about half of the people who say that stuff haven't even played the game. And I think there's a lot of people who say that just as an outlet. Because, I saw it. I saw it all the time. I saw it all the time. I can't remember how many times I'd get into a group in WoW, and there's one guy, bragging about how he did this and did that, and he forgot that they added an achievement system, and one click, you're looking at his achievements going, he's done none of that, and he can't even do this dungeon right. It's like, but he's like, then after he makes a mistake in the dungeon, he kicks everybody and he goes, you're all baddies, I could replace you all. It's like, I don't think there's as many of those types of people as people think there is. And especially in this regard, I don't think that's the prevailing community. I think the prevailing community is actually like from what I've seen, whenever somebody's like, this is too hard, there's a guy who said, this was too hard, he couldn't do it. And then a lot of people responded with, here's a couple of guide videos and here's some hints, and I think you can do it. Mm-hmm. And that, hey, get back in there and challenge yourself mentality, honestly, is really, really good. Does it prevent some people from getting into the game? Probably. But overall, I think that there's a particular... I compared it to cars this morning. Not everybody... There's a lot of people who look at a Lamborghini and say, ooh, nice car. I would love to have that. That's so awesome. There's not a lot of people who put in the time, the effort, and the drive to get to the point where they can own a car like that. So that's something that I think maybe, it's more that's a very financial example, and that's not the same as like game skill. Some of the smartest, most ingenious people I've met, when I joined Mensa, it was like half of the people that were at the Mensa group were like janitors. So intelligence is not necessarily indicative of financial status. Let's just put it that way. So there's this concept out there, as far as the video games go, that if you try and you spend time learning, you can do it. And I think that's true for the vast majority of people. And I don't think that that's its primary. I don't think that's that. I think that actually makes more people want to play it. Like it's actually not doing bad right now in the charts. It's pretty up there. It's not leading the charts, but right now there's over 30,000 people watching people play Sekiro. So that's pretty decent.
It's
it's nothing to sneeze at as far as like being a fairly smaller studio and contending with Mortal Kombat's out right now, and that's kind of the same thing where there's a pretty high skill ceiling in it. I don't know why anybody would want to play that current one, because it's kind of mired itself in problems. But overall I think the high skill ceiling helps. Mm-hmm. And I think that's fine.
What about this idea of adding an easier mode for people who just want to experience the game and don't enjoy that extreme level of difficulty, that extreme level of challenge?
You know what we call that? We call that a let's play. So I could barely say that with a straight face.
Yeah, well,
but no, that's.
I'm a little. I'm split on the issue, because I kind of see it from both sides. On the one hand, I see, okay, well, this game looks great and I want to play it, but it looks like it's too hard for me. I get that, why that could be frustrating, but then at the same time, I see, the developer is they have, this is their style, this is what they like to do, this is what the community likes, this is what their community likes. Now, here's where I think that if they were to implement an easier mode, or a story mode, or something, whatever they want to call it, and their core community were to get bent out of shape over that, I would say that's silly. Just play the game how you want. Like, okay, play it on normal mode or whatever. But if they want to expand it to a larger audience who just wants to experience the story, I don't see what the problem is with that. You can still say, well, I beat it on normal mode or hard mode or whatever you want to call it. If that's the level you want to challenge yourself on, go ahead. But if the developer doesn't want to do that, I don't think that's necessarily them giving the finger to gamers like some people have implied. Like there's a Forbes article that says, it's disrespectful to not provide an easy mode. I disagree.
Yeah,
that's moronic. They're just making their own. So they're making their game the way they want to make it.
Like I said,
don't play it.
This is Twilight Zone. This is the Twilight Zone.
Oh yeah, this is the ironic thing about it. This is the same people who complain about gamers being entitled.
Yeah.
And
it's like
that's
one week they say gamers are entitled and they demand too much from developers. The next week, they should have a easy mode because this game is too hard and the developer's concept of what they want this game to be is just too much. It's like, make up your mind, for crying out loud.
It's baffling. It's baffling. So I think there's some valid concerns on both sides of this, but there's also some ridiculous things being thrown around as well. So I don't know where I come down, but let us know in the chat, or let us know in the comments where you come down on this. Or join our Discord server and we'll have a conversation about it there. I want it to remain respectful, but we can definitely disagree and have various opinions about.
Overall, in my opinion, it's just one of the many different types of games that are out there. And if it's not your thing, then it's not your thing. But if it is your thing, then it's your thing. It's like I make my Skyrim playthroughs as hard as Sekiro. Like, trust me, if you were to be dropped into one of my Skyrim playthroughs, you would not last for more than probably 5 minutes. It's like you're not going to run up to a team of bandits and kill them all. It's like, nope, that's not how it's going to go down. You're gonna show up, you're gonna like take a shot at one guy, and then you'll immediately be shot by like 3 arrows from them. And each arrow will kill you 2 times over. So it's not that you get hit by one and you kind of like shake it off. I've got the hard arrow difficulty, which means that like you can barely move. You have to like break the arrow and then pull it out of you, and it's really messy and it's nasty. But again, it's like that's just the style that some people like, and it's not necessarily indicative of you being wrong when it comes to that. It's just the style.
Well, it's like I'm terrible at RTS games. I enjoy them to some extent. I enjoy some of them. Like I used to enjoy playing Age of Empires quite a lot. But if I'd play online against somebody, I'm just bad at them. It's just not my skill set, and I don't have the desire to get to become really, really good at it. It's just not my thing. And so I look at that and I think, if some great RTS game comes out that I really want to play, but it's quote unquote too hard for me, should I say you need to give me an easy mode, or should I say, well, it's just not my thing? I don't know. I think it's ultimately up to the developer, and I respect.
I'm curious to know what people. I'm really curious to know what people think about this. So please leave your comment, both down and in the chat, on what your kind of perception on this is, because I know some people, they go for those Madman achievements, where they'll like complete the game, or they'll like beat it over and over again until they get like the perfect thing. Or there's one, the insane achievement in WoW, for example, was a good one, where it's like yeah, you had 180 hours to burn and you were crazy.
There are some achievements in Celeste that I'm like, are you insane? There's the golden strawberries, not a chance. I beat the seasides. I collected all the strawberries. That is enough for me. I'm really looking forward to their DLC. But then it was like, golden strawberries. Beat the entire level without a single death from the beginning. No thanks. I'm good.
People forget the Iron Mode games. Like, there was Iron Mode in Jagged Alliance. I really appreciated that one. There's Iron Mode in a bunch of like the newer games out there as well. That's all cool stuff. And I think we've more or less moved away from that, which means that ultimately people just want more of it when it shows back up again. Mm-hmm. So it's my 2 cents on it.
Anyway, Sekiro is a fantastic game, in my opinion. Easily my favorite game of the year so far. Of course, we're anticipating some pretty great games up ahead, but I'm absolutely loving it. You know, I've finished my review now. I'm trying to... I still haven't completed the game. I'm trying to get through it just for fun. I do want to make some more content on it in the future, though, as well. I have recordings of all of the boss fights that I've beat so far, as well as other cool moments. But it's yeah, it's a fantastic game. I've done a full review on it that you can see on the channel. Just published it yesterday. And that's about all there is to say about it. Like, I don't have much bad to say about the game other than this one issue with the cameras that really drives me crazy. That I can't believe slipped through the QA. But anyway, I won't go into detail about that now because we are pushing right up against the time limit here. So I guess unless there's any final thoughts, we'll probably wrap it up there. So thank you.
I think that's about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching.
So the big patch for the Division 2 is out today. World Tier 5 push, so I'll probably be streaming that later on this evening, pushing to 500 gear score. I went from the current cap, which was 450. I managed to boost myself all the way up to 477, which is amazing. Now I'm going to be pushing from there all the way up to 500, so catch that later today or on the restreams.
Mohit Kumar is asking, do you guys know the release date for MCC? What is MCC?
Ooh.
Ask us in the Discord, Mohit. Not sure off the top of my head.
Master Chief Collection. That's
Master
coming.
Chief. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I believe the announcement for that's going to be later this. I think that's going to be showing up at E3 this year. I think. Huge Halo news this year. Oh my goodness! You got this, then you've got the new game, and you've got some other stuff coming. So
yeah, that'll be interesting.
Buckle yourself in. It's going to be quite the ride.
To have another great Halo game would be fantastic. All right, thank you so much for everybody. Before you go, don't forget to slam that like button, and of course subscribe to the channel if you're not already. All of that helps us out a ton. And thank you everybody who supports this show on Patreon, Old Man Manson, and our 2 anonymous supporters. Thank you to our channel member Captain Dammit. Don't forget to like and sub if you appreciate this weekly content. If you're listening after the fact on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Spotify, thank you so much for subscribing and reviewing the show. And hey, feel free to join us on Tuesday at noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the live show, where you can interact with us and other listeners and be a part of the discussion. The Augmented Reality Podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, and tons more quality gaming content. My name is Ashton Inity, and on behalf of Subsidian, thank you all so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week.